The Alberta budget was recently tabled. Finance Minister Travis Toews proudly announced in the budget that, you know what, it's balanced. In fact, we even have a surplus. To discuss this in more detail and what this means for Albertans is Lethbridge East MLA and UCP Caucus Chair Nathan Neudorf. Nathan, before we chat about the budget, let's talk about, first of all, what's happening in Ukraine and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The world is watching how it's all unfolding. Do you think sanctions will be enough to have Russian President Vladimir Putin pull his troops back?
I'm concerned that sanctions won't be enough, Hal. He seems to have been developing this plan over 8 to 10 years. This is something that his comments have been building towards for a long time. I don't think he's going to be turned away by some mere sanctions. I fear that we'll have to increase our presence from the West and NATO, United Nations forces to really put some pressure on Russia to stop this aggression.
Amazing to see how it unfolds here. And what's scary now as well is some of the Russian propaganda that's floating out there, saying that the reason why Russia's invading Ukraine is because they're attacking the American biolabs that are set up instead of just a true power grab. So it's kind of scary, the misinformation that's floating around, especially on social media right now.
It's very concerning, and I'm very sad for the people of Ukraine, for their families, and you may not know this, Hal, but Alberta has the largest grouping of people of Ukraine descent in all of Canada. It's a very tightly tied community to Ukraine, and we really feel for those people and their families and those with family members there who may be hurt or even killed by this aggression. So we just call on all partners to stand in solidarity with Ukraine to see the stop to these actions.
No, you're right. I do know I have a number of friends in Edmonton and Vegreville of Ukrainian descent, and you're right, we do have a strong Ukrainian contingency in Alberta. So yeah, let's pray that things do work out and that Russia does pull back. Now let's circle back to the budget here for just a moment. Finance Minister Travis Toews released details of the new budget, and we're back in black. But how will a balanced budget really help Albertans moving forward?
Well, I think a balanced budget does a tremendous amount of good for all Albertans, not just on a credit rating, but it just inspires investor confidence. That is a huge part of why we were able to balance is we had so much private investment from film and technology, agriculture, agri-food products, technology, I could go on, finance, all these areas of private industry saw that influx. That's there because they have confidence that the government is doing the right things to get their fiscal house in order. And I think that's where we'll see it most predominantly across Alberta and specifically here in Lethbridge.
Now, Nathan, some critics of the UCP say it really wasn't the work of your party that helped to balance the books, but more attributed to the price of oil, which is now north of $90 US per barrel. How would you respond to that?
I say absolutely that there is a huge part of the budget that was able to be balanced because of our natural resources and the price being as high as they are. But the budget wasn't tabled with $90 a barrel oil. It was tabled with, I believe it was $68 or $70 a barrel oil, a very conservative measure. And the fact remains that when we took over the government of Alberta, the trajectory of spending from budget to budget was on a 4% increase per annum per year. If that trajectory had been maintained, we would be tabling, even at current oil prices, a budget of a deficit of $6 billion, which is very much in line with what we saw with the previous administration. So we did have to take corrective measures. You can go to some of the areas where they received some of those pullbacks on spending, whether it's our post-secondaries here in Lethbridge or municipalities. They felt the pinch. They've had to make some significant adjustments, and we thank them for those efforts to help us get to the place we are today with a balanced budget being tabled.
Now, the price of groceries, heating costs, fuel for our vehicles simply going through the roof. What help is there in the budget for Albertans right now, Nathan?
Yeah, this has been a trend that I've been advocating to be looked at for about 2 years, the cost of inflation and currency devaluation. Very concerned about that, especially for our fixed income seniors and others who are on fixed income. It's very troubling for them. We hear a lot about it, and I have been advocating for that response for some time. We have 2 bills that I'm aware of. One is to address natural gas prices, a rebate system very similar to what Ralph Klein brought in 2006, where if costs go too high, there'll be a rebate that will have some security for those individuals. And there's also a bill in the works to help with electricity supply so that we can increase supply of electricity to our grid, therefore hopefully lowering prices for consumers. We wish we could do a little bit more faster. As with so many things, it may take some time to get these engaged and implemented, but we are addressing these problems in a significant way, and I hope that it provides some assurance for those on fixed income.
The Albertans really need the brakes right now, especially when it comes to natural gas and electricity, so hopefully it can be implemented this year and not next year. Now, Finance Minister Travis Toews says a large focus of the budget was also on health care. Now, Nathan, does that mean the province is going to address the doctor shortage here in our province, including right here in Lethbridge?
Absolutely. That's a huge part of what we're doing with Alberta Health Services is to capture, attract and retain doctors. And some really good news I'm expecting for Lethbridge and area, where I know offers have been extended to at least 2 doctors, and up to 20 more have been interviewed and reviewed in part of that process. So that's very positive news. I hope for a further announcement from the Minister of Health in the next few weeks for Lethbridge specifically in that regard to where we've come addressing that, not just for the province, but specifically for here in Lethbridge, a key part of the budget for me and the residents in Lethbridge who are without a family doctor at this time.
Now, are these Canadian doctors we chatted with, or maybe doctors outside of the province or even the country?
I would say that there would be a good blend of all of that. We have a very limited supply of doctors that we train here in Alberta, and I propose some ideas moving forward to how we can increase that number and increase how many are trained here in Lethbridge or in rural or less metro sites. But a good many of them would come from further afield, whether that's from outside of Alberta within Canada or whether that would be internationally. But I think people have less concern once their credentials are verified where a doctor comes from and practices, as long as they are able to get a family doctor. I think that's what they would like to see first.
Now, I was recently chatting with former Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman, who says the province really needs to do more to invest here in our region, in southwestern Alberta. He says the federal government is, but not so much the Kenny government. So Nathan, let me ask you something. What have you heard? What kind of investments can we really look forward to seeing in Lethbridge in 2022? Maybe help with a third bridge?
I worked very closely with Chris Spearman while he was still a mayor, and we achieved all 5 of the top asks of the city of Lethbridge: Exhibition Park, extended maintenance for the University of Lethbridge, airport expansion, Highway 3 development, and broadband. So that doesn't include what else our government has invested in the area: irrigation, a new school on the west side, dollars for research, huge investment in mental health and addictions. I look forward to the capital plan specifics being released in the next few days or maybe a week or two to see what's on there specifically for Lethbridge. We have been tremendously blessed in the past year or so, and we'll see a lot of those projects continue this year, but I'm looking for a few new things going forward.
The province recently struck a deal with our nurses. Nathan, how important was that for Alberta?
I think it was really important. Nurses in particular have just worked incredibly hard over the past 2 years for the pandemic. Obviously, extremely tired, on the verge, many feeling burnt out. They've worked very, very hard. So for them to be recognized and receive some compensation for that, and I believe their vote was 87% in favor of ratifying that agreement. And as I understand it, the UNA president, Heather Smith, her quote was, "This will benefit our members and is fair to the people of Alberta." So to be able to get a win-win situation like that with one of our largest unions, our frontline workers, and workers who have literally put their lives on the line for 2 years during this pandemic, I think is a tremendous sign of positivity, of hope, and a sigh of relief for many, to tell you the truth.
Now, your wife is a nurse as well, correct? What were her thoughts on this deal? What did she have to tell you?
Yeah. Yeah, she is a frontline emergency room nurse, and I think she was pleased as well. I don't think many people look forward to the opportunity or the requirement to possibly have to go through strike action or those kind of hard negotiation tactics. I think she was relieved that an agreement was able to be come to much more cooperatively. and one, like I said, that was a win-win for both sides, where the province is happy moving forward, fair to the citizens of Alberta who are the taxpayers, and fair to his members, supported by 87% of them. I think that would speak volumes to her.
Now, even though the Emergencies Act was revoked, Premier Jason Kenney said his government is still going to pursue legal action against the Trudeau Liberals over invoking the act. Why bother involving the courts if it's been revoked?
Well, I think the key point on this point, Hal, is that the action happened. The government invoked an incredibly powerful act, and could have carried on with that if there wasn't such a pushback to revoke it. So that action took place. And I think what our government, our premier, is seeking to do is provide further clarification on the thresholds required to ever invoke those kind of powers again. Those powers are incredibly significant. They shouldn't be taken lightly. And if they're not going to be listening to the citizenship of Canada in invoking those, we definitely need the courts to define the parameters in which they would be able to do so, to protect the citizens of the country for their liberties and freedoms, and define that more clearly in the court of law.
Now, what are your thoughts of the Freedom Convoy, which took place recently in Ottawa, and the number of protesters who blocked our borders, including here in Alberta at the Coutts border crossing? As you may have seen, it wasn't just truckers protesting the COVID-19 mandates at Coutts, but farmers as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a significant point, Hal, it's not just one group. I think there's many groups represented. And as a Southern Alberta MLA, I want to be clear that I do not support the federal vaccine mandate for truckers. And I do unequivocally support the right of anybody to protest peacefully. And I think I would underscore the word peacefully. And I commit to advocate on those views presented for those who are my constituents. But I would encourage anybody who previously in the past or was engaged in those not to engage in any unlawful activity. I think that's a threshold that, as part of the legislative process, part of government, I can't support unlawful or illegal activities. And I think when you don't have a homogenous group, where you have groups that are made up of many other subgroups, those different messages can damage the primary message or what they're set to accomplish. And that also is a nuance that makes it difficult for people in my role to fully support or fully disagree with the protest taking place.
March 1st, the province is looking at lifting more of the mandates, including no longer having to wear the face masks. How important is this for Albertans to, as Premier Kenney says, to learn to simply live with COVID-19?
I think it's very important. I think in the past month or so, we've seen a tremendous shift in the attitude of the broad majority of Albertans. Many of us have been feeling fatigue of the restrictions for some time. I think that's fair to say. And I think within the last month, with some other things happening, we've really felt the strain of those restrictions. And it is now time, with our numbers really dropping in a very positive way. It is a time to get back to normal in measured steps. And I think we're taking those measured steps. Some would have liked to have seen that a long time ago. Some would like to see that to take its time a little bit longer. But I think we're taking those measured steps to get people back to normal, allow them to get back to their lives, earn an income again, and enjoy the positive news that we have on an economic front in a much more fulsome way.
A number of schools said no thank you to the province for testing out the new curriculum. I believe around only 7 schools said yes. Why do you think the number was so low, and what changes were made whereby most Albertans would potentially be on board? Is there more of a focus on our Indigenous communities, perhaps?
Yeah, I think there's a number of issues in there. Again, we have a very diverse province. We have a range of views all across the province. We have 2 defined metros. We have a huge rural population, and then we have the mid-sized cities somewhere in the middle on a range of perspectives there as well. So we heard a lot of feedback over the last year, and maybe a little bit more. And since September of 2021, approximately 360 teachers have been piloting that K-6 draft curriculum with about 7,800 students across the province. So a lot more than where we first started. And Alberta Education also agreed to pause certain segments of that curriculum and focus more closely on the English language arts and literature, mathematics, physical education, and wellness for the 2022 implementation. Those other topics have been held back until some more work can be put into them, such as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit learning, as well as Francophone perspectives. And that all would come under the heading of the social studies curriculum. I think with that slight change, really in what we were hearing from the large population in Alberta has really changed that acceptance level and really moved ahead the willingness to implement much of that curriculum this September. And I think that's going to result in a much more positive outcome for everyone involved, teachers, students, parents, and the population in general.
Lethbridge East MLA and UCP Caucus Chair Nathan Neudorf, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Hal.